The chair calls the Education Policy Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. And the Committee Legislative Assistant has indicated we have a quorum. So a quorum is present. Representative DePel, have you had a chance to review the minutes for Wednesday, March 25th or March 5th, 2025? And if so, would you approve the minutes?
Yes, I have had an opportunity to review the minutes, and I move that the minutes be approved.
Thank you. Representative DePel moves approval of the minutes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the minutes of Wednesday, March 5th, 2025 are approved. So members, we're going to begin today with House File 914, and Representative Quam, welcome to the committee. The chair moves that House File 914 be referred to the Committee on Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law. Representative Quam, please present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've had this bill for a few terms, but in late February, the state Supreme Court ruled that a public school was liable for being sued because a person they hired had allegations, previous allegations. And that kind of stuff doesn't show up on background checks. Too frequently, we hear about bad actors who have jumped multiple schools and have finally been caught and prosecuted, but they had a history because it takes a long time to research a complaint. This would say, after you've decided to interview a person, your HR department can talk to the HR department that the person had worked at or was working at and share that file, and the person would be notified, and you can't cancel the interview, but that way the person could be asked about stuff and it covered. Right now, especially after this state Supreme Court decision, a school could be sued for $1 million, $2 million for hiring somebody they had no way of understanding there were previous allegations. And this was set up to have some fairness for the person so that they're told the file is being shared. Both HR departments have the same privacy and non-public treatment of data. So there's no lessening of protection of that data. It is just, I guess, helping prevent the hopping from school to school of a bad actor.
Thank you, Representative Quam. And you have one testifier, Deb Courthouse. And when you're ready, go ahead and state your name for the record and your title and begin.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Bennett, committee members. My name is Deb Courthouse. That's DEBCORHOUSE. I'm an attorney for Education Minnesota, where we represent 85,000 school professionals, many of whom are public employees protected by the Minnesota Government Practices Act, which is gutted by this bill. For very strong public policy reasons, the Data Practices Act limits what information about an employee is public. This bill, however, would allow any interviewing employer to access all of that private information, much of which could lead to discriminatory treatment. An employee's personnel file contains details about medical leaves, whether that's for themselves or a family member. The file contains the specifics of ADA accommodations for disabilities. It contains information about complaints they may have filed against someone else, the garnishment of their wages. The file could also contain evidence of false accusations that have been resolved. It also likely contains all of the employees' evaluations and coaching letters, which are documents that are intended to improve their practice, not to be used punitively to inform a future employer. All of these documents could lead to interviewers making biased and unlawful decisions, which could result in litigation over discrimination. Any data that an interviewing employer needs is already accessible. The Data Practices Act designates all final discipline as public data. If a prospective employer believes it needs additional information, it can absolutely ask a candidate to sign a release for that private information. Then the individual has the ability to decide whether or not they want this information provided and which private information to release. We thank you for your consideration of these concerns and request that you vote no on House File 914.
Thank you for your testimony, members. Is there any discussion? No? Lead Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Quam, for leading for authoring and presenting your bill. Sorry, I think we're all feeling it this week with the early mornings. I guess my question is what, you talked about a problem that you have observed. So what data are you actually, think that we need to have here? What data do you think is important for the school districts to know? Do you think it's important for people making hiring decisions to have access to everything in a personnel file to make a decision about candidates? Or are you looking for something more specific?
Representative Quam.
First of all, I need to correct the statement of the testifier. The data is not made public. Both HR departments have the same constraints on public and non-public data. Therefore, this action doesn't make it public. If there was a desire to fine-tune the information, but the HR department is aware of if in the file this was investigated and found to have no basis. Again, you're not talking any employer, you're talking one school to another school, the same HR department, which understand the same regulations, constraints, and et cetera. Maybe the judicial committee would be able to go over the fine-tooth comb of what the state Supreme Court's decision holding a school liable for information that is not readily available. So I basically want to protect the students.
Lead Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Quam, for that. So I guess to just maybe put a finer point on it, do you think that in hiring, when teachers are applying for jobs, you're maybe moving from one school district to another, which happens for any number of reasons, do you think that they need the whole personnel file, or are there just certain pieces of information within that personnel file that are necessary for conducting that interview and making hiring choices? Or do you think they should have access to the entirety of the personnel file?
Representative Quam.
Thank you. If the legislature decides to have a narrower amount of data sharing, I'm okay with having it narrowed some, but I'm not okay with almost every year I hear about someone who has is being charged or was convicted of abusing a child, and it's found out that that was not the first child, not the first job at which they did that. And that's the intent of this, is to protect children and protect people by having it not public and the same controls between the HR departments.
Lead Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Quam. I think that I appreciate that you're willing to work on this and maybe narrow it. I would strongly encourage you to do so. I can't vote for this bill as it is written without an amendment on it. And I'll tell you why, because I am concerned about everything that is in a personnel file and what that could mean. I have heard from constituents who have interviewed for jobs while visibly pregnant and gotten a very different response when they weren't visibly pregnant. And, it's very, very, very difficult to prove discrimination in hiring, but we do know that it happens. And having interviewing for a job and knowing that they could access things like how many maternity, like if I was a teacher, knowing that a district could access how many maternity leaves I had gone on, which is within my rights. We want our teachers to be able to have families and care for themselves and loved ones, having access to any ADA accommodations that they might have. This isn't necessarily something that that should be the basis for hiring. And that is, I think your goal is laudable about protecting children, but there's just a lot more information in these personnel files that I wouldn't want my, a prospective employer to know how many maternity leaves I've taken. I don't think that should be part of hiring. And we do know that people are discriminated against, women and people with disabilities. And so making sure that you're restricting that and getting at a very narrow aspect of that, and maybe working with some of those employment lawyers to see what is already accessible in the job interview process, is something I would encourage you to do. So I'm going to be a no today for those reasons.
Thank you, members. Representative Quam, do you have any final comments?
Um,
Oh, I'm
just-
sorry. Oops, I'm sorry. Representative Kwan, sorry about, Representative Green, apologize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Quam. Good to see you in this committee. Just sat across from you not too long ago. I don't think anyone in this room or in this building don't think that we need to protect students and protect children. And I think that's how we lead as a legislature, and I think that's how we lead in Minnesota. So my question is about, well, I have two questions. One is, background checks are required in the state of Minnesota to hire. So what role do background checks, what are they missing that you would want to get out of a personnel file? Because then that's my question.
Representative Quam.
Accusations, and I've been on a school board, and I know that the process for investigating a accusation is lengthy. And I also know, and I observed, that oftentimes a person jumps to a different school before that process is done, and then it's basically dropped. A background check, again, would not cover what the state Supreme Court held a public school liable for, and they didn't have a way of, easily finding that out. If you have a other process that's cumbersome or maybe allows for discretionary leaving out of things. Frankly, I'd like the data protected, so that's why one HR to another HR. I would like the person informed of the process, and it's only after they're being picked for an interview. I could have made this extremely detailed, but I wanted the committee action, so multiple people saying, this, and this should be excluded from the share. And in that conversation, we can make a good bill. I am satisfied with having this pass and protect kids. That's my goal. If there are improvements with amendments and clarifications, I'm fine with that. Right now, we've got a gap. I'd like to fill that.
Representative Green, follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just another quick follow-up. So what if you hire a teacher that isn't coming from another school district, who has gone through schooling? Where are you suggesting that we would get personnel data from if someone had gone to school at night, gotten their teaching degree, but worked at Starbucks? Like, would this bill allow us to get the personnel files from Starbucks?
Representative Quam.
This is specifically aimed at fixing the issue, which you don't have to do a lot of Googling or searching to find out that it's out there. If you want to generate a bill to help schools gain the kind of information about accusations at other employers, I think that's a little more complex, and I wish you very much luck. The main focus is on preventing a bad actor who's been accused at a school from jumping to another school.
Representative Green.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. No, I only bring that up because I think that's why we have the background checks for teachers. And I think the personnel file is just a lot more cumbersome. And I'm also be very worried about the cost and what that would do and being able to redact all that information. And it would become, I think, a bit subjective on what's shared and what's not shared. So I think there's just a lot more questions on this bill than I have. So I cannot support this bill, but thank you for being here.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Chair Bennett, and thank you for the bill, Representative Quam. My question is maybe for you or maybe for our testifier to just talk about the layers of protection that are already in place. We've heard about the questions around background checks, but I'm also aware that there is a board of teaching that would review any accusation, and it may impact the validity or suspension of that educator's license for a time or permanently. And so I don't know how that interacts with this process to make sure those protections are in place, because I know that body is in place and it does meet regularly, and people have lost their license that I'm aware of. So.
Representative Quam, would you like to answer that, or would you like nonpartisan to answer?
Well, it would be good for nonpartisan, but I believe the suspension of a teaching license would be a publicly available bit of information. But background checks do not give information on somebody that's been accused of something, except for I think law enforcement's allowed a deeper dive in a few. I've got another bill for that. I just haven't gotten a hearing on it yet.
Okay. Mr. Strahm, do you want to take that one? Ms. Para, sorry about that. I always do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hill, Representative Quam, and members. Yes, Pelsby investigates complaints that are brought to them. There's a code of ethics, and they do investigate, and there is a whole administrative process to deal with complaints and suspend or revoke licenses, or there's other corrective action that a board can take, and that some of that information is made publicly available.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Chair Bennett. Thank you, Ms. Para. At this time, I have no more questions, but I really thank you for the bill and the conversation today.
Okay, let's wrap this up. So Representative Quam, final comments.
This is going to a committee that's very well versed in, judicial and privacy and et cetera. And if you want to assist in a amendment that we could put forward at that committee hearing, I'm open to that. I just ask that we progress this process because I think we need to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair renews the motion that House File 914 be re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay? No. And the right words here. The motion prevails, and House File 914 is re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. Next on the agenda, we have House File, thank you, Representative Quam, House File 630. Representative Mueller, will let you make your way to the testifier table. And while Representative Mueller walks up, I will get some of this wordy stuff done here. Representative Mueller moves that House File 630 be referred to the Education Finance Committee. And members, Representative Mueller has the A1 amendment, which should be in your packets. So Representative Mueller has an author's amendment. Members, we will adopt the A1 amendment to put the bill in the shape the author prefers, and then Rep. Mueller will present her bill as amended. All those in favor of the A1 amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and the A1 amendment is adopted. Representative Mueller, please present your bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members. I am looking forward to talking about House File 630 and the amendment that you, as amended. We are looking at the pilot program. Well, let me just give some context. So I was elected in 2020, and the very first thing when I met with my school in Austin was talking about subs. And I was a sub coordinator in a previous life when, as I was also teaching. And I know how difficult it is to find subs and how difficult it was to keep subs. And I know Representative Keeler has also dealt with subs and all the excitement that has to go along with that. And so there was a bill that was introduced by my predecessor and that I kind of took up and moved some things around. The language came from my school district in Austin and tried to get it through the process. It didn't go through in my first term. My second term, we were hearing all sorts about, especially after the pandemic, how it's just been horrific for our schools to try to to find substitute teachers, and there are classes that are going without subs, or there are classes that we're having parents in the classroom just to have an adult there. There were newspaper articles and all the things. So we brought up the substitute teacher pilot program again, and it was finally passed. A version of it was finally passed last term. With that, with the old pilot program that was passed last term, it was limited to about 2 years. And it also said that if you look on the original bill, or if you look in the bill, 2.13 to 2.15, it says that to participate in the pilot program, you had to pay your substitute teacher at least $200 a day. So this made it difficult for many of my rural districts in order to participate in this because they didn't have the funds to be able to do that for their substitute teachers. So the amendment that was just adopted, and again, thank you, Madam Chair, is that language is removed. And I have heard the language that I've put in there, this was when I was working on this last year, this language came was approved at that time, unless I have the wrong language that I was trying to find last time. This was approved by Pelsby last time, but was not adopted. And then on 216 of the bill, we actually just strike it out being a pilot and say this is the new way of doing substitute teachers. We've heard from Pelsby that the expanded flexibility and expanded pool for our school districts has been helpful. And so I'm like, let's not just extend this. Let's just make this make it be what it is. So that's what the amendment does. It just strikes it being a pilot and becomes this is a new thing. And we do strike taking out the $200 a day. And Madam Chair, I do have a couple of testifiers that would like to come and share their thoughts about this.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. We'll start with Caitlin Snyder, or can we have Caitlin maybe come up first? No? Oh. We're going to start. Okay, so are one of you, I'm just going to let you say your names. Okay, so it's going to be Kristen Delmer?
Damer.
Damer, okay, go ahead and begin. Introduce yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bennett and committee members. I am Kristen Damer. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Administrative Services for the Moorhead Area Public School District, and I'm speaking on behalf of House File 630 and the amendment as well today, in order to continue the pilot for the substitute teaching, as well as advocating for the removal of the $200 requirement in order to participate in the pilot, which has been a financial barrier for some districts to implement the pilot, including Moorhead. Moorhead is a rural district, and it sits on the border of Minnesota and North Dakota, which presents, of course, unique challenges. It's considered to be a part of a three-city metro area of Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead. Moorhead has a population of about 45,000, and our metro area is about 200,000, with people working and living across the Minnesota-North Dakota border. Moorhead's current student population is about 7,300. We employ approximately 1,300 permanent employees. 46% of those employees are licensed teaching staff. We currently use a third party to employ our substitutes, a change that we made in 23 to 24 school year in order to see if we could get some support recruiting substitutes, as we have very good, very low unemployment in the Fargo-Moorhead area, which we'll talk a little bit about. But we generally have maintained generally the same number of substitutes, and we haven't seen significant increases in available subs, and have actually had more difficulty finding long-term subs. Moorhead's not unlike other districts, both rural and metro, who have seen significant substitute shortages in the last few years, which have been exacerbated by my region's low unemployment rate, which is wonderful, but not a lot of workers, successful economic development, and increases in student enrollment in all three large districts of Fargo, West Fargo, and Moorhead. A great problem to have, but also requires us to hire more teachers. So generally, as that enrollment grows, our pool of substitute teachers typically employed in those positions are finding permanent positions, which is great. But in addition, we've also seen a general decrease in applicants for teaching positions in alignment with fewer students entering the teaching profession. Recent changes to employee leave. Sorry, can I go ahead? Or
To wrap it up, thank you.
Okay, so one thing I just wanted to note as I wrap up is our average fill rates generally are between 60 and 65%, with our lowest being 52%, and that was in February, which meant on one day, 26 classrooms remained open, which creates, of course, a problem of combining classrooms, multiple classrooms in gymnasiums or in theaters, or people, students not getting services, as well as contributes to burnout of our existing workforce. So with that, thank you very much, and I will be open for questions at any time.
Thank you. And to the testifiers, I apologize. I meant to say try to keep it to about 2 minutes, but I'm not going to cut you off right there. We just try to keep things moving. But thank you so much. And so is this Superintendent Sandsted?
Yeah.
Go ahead and
Rick
introduce yourself for the record and begin.
You bet. So Chair Bennett, Representative Mueller, committee members, Rick Sandsted, Superintendent of Schools, Alexandria. Ms. Damer shared some of the data. I'll share some story. I know there's some educators in the room as well who may have this as part of their experience, but nearly every morning in Alexandria, our principals and our secretaries dread the hour before school starts as we look to fill staffing gaps in the day due to illness or absence. We will solve problems by combining classrooms, having teachers cover during their prep time, or having principals sub. They've even allowed me to sub. As you might imagine, this cycle puts great stress on our staff. And we can do hard things and be creative in our work, but we don't want that to be the norm of every day. It does get to be exhausting. I'm here to advocate for the extension of, or the passing of the short call substitute program, minus the pilot. District decisions around substitute teacher pay are often made with some regional context. The $200 a day requirement in our region is really not affordable. We have numerous qualified people in our community. We have a community college, so we have lots of adults with an AA degree. We also have great, talented paraprofessionals. We do conduct training with our substitute teachers and would love to add to that pool. So the passing of House File 630, along with the removal of the $200 minimum, I believe is an innovative opportunity that would provide greater flexibility to our staffing challenges from Austin to Stillwater and Moorhead to Edina. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one more testifier, Caitlin Snyder. Yeah, and after she's done, your two testifiers can come on back up. So go ahead, Ms. Snyder, introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Caitlin Snyder with Education Minnesota. And I will say this is the first bill that I ever talked about with Representative Mueller. I think it was just pre-COVID. And I understand that the interest from the Austin local is a genuine one. The sub shortage hurts our schools, it hurts our kids, and it hurts our educators. We have teachers delay necessary medical appointments, occupational therapy, elective or emergency surgery, teach while sick, and more because teachers know if they are not in the classroom, there will be learning loss for our students. A short call sub is limited to 4 weeks of instruction. They have no requirement to have any training in the science of reading, no cultural competency training, no knowledge of what an IEP or a 504 plan is. This committee is having conversations about how disastrous 3 lost instructional days can be for students. So this is 4 weeks of lost instruction. What's more, there's no real limit to just this 4-week time. In practice, many short call subs monitor a classroom for 4 weeks, maybe take a day off or take another assignment, and then come back into the same classroom. Nothing in statute prevents this or even requires it to be reported to parents. In fact, the Pioneer Press quoted someone recently who was using a short call sub license to cover a course for a colleague for an extended medical leave, clearly an abuse of this license. As a reminder, short call subs are already cheap. Schools do not pay the TRA contribution for short call subs, saving 8% of pay. And short call subs are excluded from the definition of public employees under the Public Employee Relations Act 17903, subdivision 14. This means that people participating in this pilot, even if their usual job is as a paraprofessional in an Education Minnesota unit or an AFSCME or SEIU unit, are operating outside the unit without a contract and without due process protections contained therein. After the election, we surveyed almost 9,000 of our members, and the number one priority for all of our members was raising educator pay. 25 states have directly invested in educator pay, including our neighboring states, where Iowa and South Dakota now have a minimum teacher salary of $45,000 and $50,000 respectively. Adopting this amendment and moving this bill will lower educator pay, which during an educator shortage is extremely tone deaf. Minnesota has higher paying jobs overall than our neighboring states, which means that our educator pay disparity is 31% in Minnesota compared to 16% in our neighboring states. There's no other profession in the world where you would solve a shortage by lowering their pay. Educators are professionals, care work is real work, it should be compensated appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you to our testifiers, and that concludes public testimony. Members, do we have any discussion? Representative Keeler.
Thanks, Chair. I want to first make a comment about the fact that somebody noted Moorhead to Edina, and I want to just give the shout out to our Moorhead hockey boys who, one, we are no longer the bridesmaid, we are the bride. And sitting next to Edina, just had to make sure I made that comment.
I mean, also not wrong.
Okay, thanks, Chair. But, okay, to the bill. Just trying to have some good fun.
I love it.
Okay, so I have sat as a substitute coordinator, actually with Moorhead. So this is an area that I do deeply understand when you talk about that morning panic of what our percent is, what classrooms have to just go unseen. Often it's our music, our art, our specials, right, that we then don't get to have, and we know that that's critical. So I'm all on board with making this a permanent thing. I want to be very clear with that. But I do have some questions around the pay, because I do think that that's where it's hard for me to support this bill. You and I have had these conversations for a very, very long time, and I do want you to know that I'm coming in an honest way to try to help shape this bill in a way that I can support it. So the first question I'll ask you, but it may actually be something that the department or somebody else needs to answer, but how do we determine at this point in time what our sub rate is? Is it a percentage of what the teacher pay is? Is it just like, because I can't seem to find a clear definition, or how do we determine that? Because I know geographic spread, it's different.
So I may not have the same.
Just introduce yourself one more time and then go ahead and comment.
Rick Sandsted, Superintendent, Alexandria. So Kristen maybe could respond to the regional challenge of the competitors in North Dakota. In our region, we'll send a text message between our superintendents as we make our substitute pay. So this is it's not embedded necessarily in the teacher contract, but in part of our rate schedule for the year. And we try to stay within the ballpark of each other. Parker's Prairie, a little bit north of us, smaller district. I want to say they're like $140 a day. We're at $160. Minnewaska, just to the south, they have a little more competitive spirit. They're at $170. The others on the east and west of us are right around that $160 mark. And so we decide that in response. Now, the challenge is we've upped that amount in the last number of years without a whole lot of results of additional people, and maybe related more to the labor shortage than it is about cost. So I don't know if I'll let Kristen add.
Kristen Damer. So I would say very similarly to Alexandria, we often had a conversation regionally about what that was at, partially so that we weren't competing against each other where at all possible. We as well have increased our substitute pay, I would say considerably in the last 6 years. Some of it, I will say that for us, again, to Alexandria, I'm not sure if it's similar or not, but our long-term sub pay, for example, is always based on our BA step 1, which would be the very lowest amount that you can bring in a teacher at what would generally be considered their daily rate of pay. So anyone working that 31 days or longer in a substitute capacity would always make that amount. And it's important, I think, to some of the other districts that our base pay can also be offset. Some districts have bonuses, or you can get paid extra during the day if you pick up a pair or a prep time or something. But generally it's regional, and there is some basis within the contract, especially for long-term subs.
Representative
Madam
Mueller?
Chair, thank you. I think I would really like to, and I really appreciate their context, but when we talk about substitute teacher pay, there has to be also a full context of this, because what we heard from Edmund here is this idea of 4 weeks, after 15 days, right, they have to be a licensed teacher. And I guess I hadn't heard this idea of stopping for 1 day and then re-upping and doing, I hadn't heard that it had, and I'll be honest, I haven't heard it in my district, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening in other places. I'm just saying that. I will say this, that when you're a substitute teacher, because you get a chance to say no, you get to say, I'm sorry, I'm busy today. I can't come in, because you're not under contract. You're not under those things. And so because you essentially are able to kind of pick the hours that you get to work, you have some of those trade-offs of those things. When I talked to the HR person in Austin, who is no longer there anymore, he talked about the idea of, I could raise this to $300 a day, and I still wouldn't get more people, because the people that I'm getting are still within the same pool that we're asking to pull from. And so when you're able to pull from a bigger pool, then you're able to get people that have different life experiences and have different connections to the community. And again, they still have the flexibility of when they get to teach. I've been in the classroom for a long time, and I would like to add that hopefully you guys have all had a chance, I know several of you are in schools now, but hopefully you've been into your district's classrooms, and there's lots of technology. Even before the COVID happened, I was still delivering lessons in person and recording myself online and giving those so that they actually had resources on their online learning platforms. So I was able to leave lesson plans for my subs that literally was open up Schoology and listen to this video, and they have to finish these certain tasks. And I actually could, if I was sick, I could actually be at home answering student questions, correcting their homework, giving them feedback. I was able to do that. Whereas a human being sub was there just connecting with them, making sure everyone was doing what they needed to be doing, and then also just overall classroom management. So I need to just reiterate that when we're talking about substitute teachers, the goal is to broaden the pool, and that's what this originally did. But when we put the stipulation on $200 a day, it made it so that they couldn't broaden their pool, and that's what they want to be able to do.
Representative Keeler, follow up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Okay, so back to the question, right? So the testifiers, I appreciate what you guys were saying. So what I'm hearing is that there's some regional collectiveness then to make sure that you're not like, you don't have one bully district, right, that's like paying $240 and we'd all drive the extra hour to go work there, right? Okay, so that that's kind of what I was looking for. What I'm nervous about, so when we talk about long-term subs, there is like a formula or percentage that we know it's based on step 1, right? Is that, I feel like, is what we're doing. So I wonder that rather than saying like the $200, right, like is there more of a lane that we can explore that's just a smaller percentage of what that step 1 is, so that because our teachers should be competitive within regions, I would assume. So then this idea that we're sending a text or a group or an official conversation with other principals in our region to make sure we're within competitiveness. I'm just wondering if there's like an easier way that we could do that. That's kind of the first thing, if you'd be willing to explore, you know, not the 200, but that we're doing some sort of percentage that's a commitment. I think that's fair. The second suggestion I would give, and I know that this is something that Moore had chatted about it, and I'm not sure if we do it anymore, so I don't mean to put us on blast, but that we weren't necessarily raising the daily rate, but like once you got to your 15th day, there was like a bonus, right? Because in Moorhead, we could go to Moorhead or Fargo or anywhere, so it was kind of that draw that after you've shown some commitment and you're with us, that then after so many days, you kind of get this perk. Are either of those at all of interest in exploring how we can make sure that the compensation is fair as we move forward? That's a question, and then I have one more question after that.
Mueller, would you like to address either of those questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, if it makes sense to our experts here who are dealing with this every day, because let's be honest, I was just the coordinator. I wasn't the one who was paying them. But if verbiage like that is something that they're able to do, I have no problem with that, as long as it's just not some blanket, everyone that has to be $200, if there's something like that. And what I would do, Madam Chair, is just ask for some practical application here if they would be willing to give their insights.
Would either of you like to chime in on that?
So we
Go
did.
ahead. Superintendent Sampson.
Superintendent Sandsted, yeah, Alexandria. We did actually implement the 15-day, once you were there 15 days, you get another $10 a day. The people that were coming 15 days were coming anyway. We were happy to support them a little bit. And I would, after listening to the Education Minnesota testimony, I actually think this is all an and. The things that were testified about and teacher pay, yeah, I think all those things sound great. And let's do this in the meantime to continue to bridge the gap for the current members of Education Minnesota along the way who continue to cover classrooms for each other. If you came to our Education Minnesota meeting in Alexandria, I think they would say they would appreciate the opportunity to engage in this process with our paraprofessionals and people with AA degrees in our community, just to see if we can expand the pool. And that's where I think the risk is low and the benefit is potentially high for this opportunity.
Superintendent Damer, any additional comments or?
Assistant Superintendent Damer, and
Damer,
I would say it is, that's hard to follow. No, that is very well said. I would say as well, though, that we do still have kind of the middle ground for people. With us, it's day 11. So 11 days, and you move to the next level before becoming.
Thank you. Representative Keeler?
Yeah.
You have one more question?
I
or-
do. I have a bajillion questions. I'm sorry. I think obviously offline we can lean into this a little more. So the next question I have was just based off some of the things you guys have said about it being the same pool. You know, it's the same people that are coming back. So I think the intention we had here with making these shifts was that it would actually not just the money component, but because we were changing the credentials needed, we would grow a bigger pool. And so I just kind of want you to expand on like, if we're seeing the same people come back, has the expansion of the credentials increased the pool, or how are we tracking that?
Representative
Madam Chair,
Mueller.
just to clarify, these people were not able to participate in the pilot because they can't pay the $200 a day, so they wouldn't see that expansion. If we had a testifier that was able to participate in the pilot, we have been told by Pelsby that they have had school districts that have seen more, they've seen success with this program.
Representative Keeler?
Is anybody here from Pelsby that can, I'm just, like, do we have some, yeah.
Do we have anybody from
Dr.
Pell's?
Bailey is
Bailey,
here, so
yes.
that would be great if she came.
Sorry, is that okay?
Absolutely,
Okay, thank you,
yes.
Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey.
And go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Dr. Elena Bailey. I'm the Executive Director of the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board, otherwise known as Pelsby. We'll be presenting on HF 1418 later, and I believe as part of that, in your packets, you do have a set of data of legislative outcomes, which does include data on the short call substitute pilot. What page that's on. Starting, I believe, on the 5th page, it shows the data from July 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2024. And it has some graphs that show the spread of use across economic development districts, the number of individuals, the number of districts, type of districts. So we were well prepared with the data for you all today. I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Is there anything more? Beck?
I appreciate that Pelsby is here and Dr. Bailey is here with the data. My concern, not with the data, I'm not concerned with the data, but what, again, is the purpose of the reason why I have this and the reason why I had this amendment and the reason why I think we should continue working on this, Representative Keeler, because I believe we do have the same goal of trying to make sure that as many people can participate in this expanded pool as possible. Like if we're seeing what's happening here, then I want to make sure that other people are able to participate in that. And currently, the $200 a day is a barrier. If there's a better way to word it that makes it not just a blanket, just take that away and school districts can decide what they want, then I'd be willing to talk about that too.
Representative Keeler?
No, thanks, Chair. I do appreciate this work. I do want to say it is critical. I think substitutes get overlooked a lot. I think often it's just this narrative that we just have somebody sitting in a classroom. And I can tell you, I have people who love being a substitute and they really put a lot of care and compassion into the classroom. And so I just don't want subs to get a bad rap because I do really think they're critical and I think they're valuable to our entire education system. I just want to make sure that we're not utilizing them without seeing the quality and value in them. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome. And I guess I'm going to make a quick comment here and then see if there's anybody else. But in my local schools, I've heard a lot about this issue too. The problem with the $200, not only they can't afford it, but if they pay the $200 to the person in the program, but not to their other subs, then you end up with really hard feelings. And so they were just not utilizing the program because of that. So it is something I think Rep. Mueller is interested in working on more. I appreciate that. So I'll go to Lee Jordan, but anybody else out there? I don't see any more. Lee Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I do think this is an important discussion about both subs and educator pay, so I hope we can continue that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mueller, some final comments?
Thank you, and I really thank you for the discussion. We all value our substitute teachers, and we all want to make sure that we have the best people in the classroom when our teachers can't be there. I was also a substitute teacher before I got my first contracted job. I was also a long-term sub, and I was a long-term sub actually this past fall. And so I have done all the roles and realize just how important it is for us to have as many people as possible who care about kids, who are qualified to come into our classroom. And, this expansion of a pool is really important because we want to have as many people as possible that reflect our students and are able to connect with our kids. And we want to make sure that we are able to pay them as much as we can, but it isn't prohibitive of being able to participate in this expansion that we had. So with that, Madam Chair, I would renew my motion to re-refer this to Education Finance.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. And Representative Mueller renews the motion that House File 630 as amended be re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and House File 630 as amended is re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. And Representative Mueller, you can stay there a little bit longer. Next on the agenda is House File 1959. Sounds like a birth date. Representative Mueller moves that House File 1959 be re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. Please present your bill.
All right, 1959. Thank you, Madam Chair. Birthday. Sorry, I got caught off guard by that comment.
That's okay, Representative Mueller. Well, it's awfully close to my birth year.
I don't want to out my mom, but my mom's birthday is in 1958, so love you, Mom.
Okay, Representative Mueller, I could be your mother because I was born in 1958, so there you go.
If she's watching, she's going to be texting me right now.
Tell her we have mutual birth years. Go ahead, Rep. Mueller.
Thank you so much. And Madam Chair and members, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present 1959, which clarifies that all Pelsby-approved teacher preparation programs, including Teach Minnesota, are explicitly eligible for state grants. This bill removes ambiguity and clarifies eligibility for various state-funded programs supporting teacher preparation, licensure, and recruitment by including all teacher preparation programs that have been approved by PELSB. The bill specifically mentions several programs such as Grow Your Own, CUGMEG, Student Teaching Stipend Pilot Program, grants for underrepresented student teachers, grants for student teachers in shortage areas, aspiring teachers of color, scholarship, teacher mentorship and induction programs, and teacher shortage loan repayment program. So here's the thing. Teach Minnesota is a PELS, and this is where this bill came from this actual knowledge of, I went to go visit a school that uses Teach Minnesota, and they told me about this dilemma, and that's why I'm carrying this bill. Teach Minnesota is a PELSB-approved teacher preparation and certification pathway addressing Minnesota teacher shortage by bringing professionals and recent graduates into the classroom. Participants undergo an intensive pre-service training where they learn core teaching skills such as student engagement, classroom management, and instruction delivery. This training includes practical experience with students in the local classrooms and complemented by coaching and feedback and experienced educators. This is a learn and earn model that allows participants to receive hands-on training while working towards their Tier 3 license. This approach enables aspiring teachers to gain practical experience and earn an income simultaneously as a Tier 2 teacher, making the profession more accessible to individuals who might be deterred by traditional unpaid student teaching requirements. And you'll be hearing, if you're in education finance, you'll be hearing about how I just want to be able to explore other non-traditional pathways, including my teacher apprenticeship bill, which is coming on Thursday in Ed Finance. And so, but this here, a cornerstone of Teach Minnesota program is a mentorship provided to participants. Throughout the training, fellows receive intensive coaching from experienced coaches and teachers, ensuring they develop the necessary skills and confidence to succeed in the classroom. This coaching continues as they transition into full-time teaching roles, offering ongoing support during their critical first year in the profession. By providing an innovative pathway into teaching, Teach Minnesota helps to address the state's teacher shortage. The program attracts individuals from diverse professional backgrounds, expanding the pool of potential educators and bringing a wealth of real-world experience into the classroom. So House File 1959 seeks to clarify eligibility criteria for PELSB-approved teacher preparation program grants. This bill does not change eligibility for state grant program, but clarifies that all PELSB-approved programs can apply for grant funding. To be clear, there is nothing in statute that says Teach Minnesota cannot apply for grants, but we want to be crystal clear that all PELSB-approved programs are eligible, not just traditional pathway programs through the traditional ways. And so that these guys would be eligible for the application for an opportunity to expand their work. So I'm going to urge you to support House File 1959. I do have a testifier, Madam Chair, and would like to invite her, and I do believe that Caitlin Schneider, also from Edmond, would like to testify on the bill as well.
Representative Mueller, we're going to start with Caitlin Snyder and then go on to the other testifier
Fantastic.
who is remote.
Thank you,
That's okay with you. So Caitlin Snyder, go ahead and come on up again. Introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Caitlin Snyder with Education Minnesota. I signed up to testify today not really knowing what I was going to say, but I think that Representative Mueller kind of answered some of the questions I had. There are a lot of different programs aimed at the teacher shortage. The fact that there's an unpaid student teaching experience, the fact that tuition is here, the fact that we have licensures or shortages or not enough teachers of color in front of our kids. So each of these programs have different requirements. So I was curious about, would this mean that all approved programs had to be considered eligible for all of these different kind of grants that work together, sometimes well, sometimes not so well? But that has been answered in the walkthrough this morning by the author. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And we do have a remote testifier. and I apologize if I mess up the name, Meghna Sohoni from Teach Minnesota. Meghna, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead and proceed with your name and title and begin.
Madam Chair, Representative Mueller, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Meghna Sohoni, and I am with Teach Minnesota, which is a program of TNTP. I'm here in support of House File 1959, which would clarify access to state funds for PELSB-approved alternative certification and preparation programs like Teach Minnesota. So Teach Minnesota certifies teacher candidates to receive their Tier 3 license in both elementary and special education. We know that all Minnesota's young people deserve access to high-quality teachers who can provide them with excellent academic experiences. Teach Minnesota seeks to do just that by recruiting, selecting, and training highly effective educators to address educator shortages and increase educator effectiveness, ultimately changing outcomes for students in Minnesota. While we know Minnesota, like other states across the nation, is facing an educator shortage, Teach Minnesota is uniquely positioned to address this. Over the course of 3 years, Teach Minnesota has had over 90 teachers who have started teaching. 88% of our teachers continue teaching beyond their first year, and 86% are local to Minnesota. All our teachers are hired as Tier 2 teachers of record while completing the program, offering program participants the full salary and benefits of a Tier 2 teacher. Once in the classroom, our teachers receive intensive in-class coaching and support. Our model is also highly effective and rigorous in alignment with state standards. A mathematical policy research study found that students taught by novice TNTP-trained math teachers outperform students of novice comparison teachers by roughly 4.5 months of additional learning. House File 1959 would allow PELSB-approved alternative prep and certification programs like Teach Minnesota to provide our teacher candidates access to an affordable, cost-effective, and rigorous pathway into teaching. It would mean that our teachers are supported financially and have the resources needed in order to support their careers as excellent educators that students in Minnesota deserve. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you, and thank you to our testifiers. That concludes public testimony. Members, do we have any discussion on the bill? Make sure we, okay, Lead Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Mueller, for this bill. I think it's a good bill. I'm just trying to understand it a little bit better, so forgive me if I ask this question oddly. My understanding is that some of these programs are loan repayment programs. So how does that work as a grant to like a teacher prep program, or are they just not eligible for that? So how does that work where some of these programs are grant repayment for student loan, you know what I'm asking? Like some of these programs that we have are like loan repayment assistance for teachers who do service. How does that work if it's a teacher prep program that doesn't necessarily have student loans?
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Jordan. I guess that's a question that I don't know, I'll be honest. We can ask Mr. Strum or Ms. Para about that. I will say this, that the purpose of this is just to clarify the language that just says, hey, they're eligible to at least apply. So any type of stipulations that were already in the program would still apply from what I understand. And so that's what I understood it to be. I will say, and sorry, Mr. Strom, as I continue going on, I will say that the reason why this came to me is because when I visited Teach Minnesota, one of their schools, and they were talking about extra funding that they needed, I said, well, aren't you able to apply for like the Cugman grant or the other type of things? And they said, actually, we're not or at least we don't think we can, because even though we're approved, we're not a traditional pathway, which is one of the specific requirements. And so this was just to clarify that. So it's just to expand it from what I understand. And Mr. Strom or Ms. Para, if you have any additional insights that you would like to share, I would appreciate that, Madam Chair.
I don't know. I think you might have stumped them. I've never seen that happen. I'm looking at their faces. No, go ahead. I doubt it. So, Ms. Para.
Madam Chair, Representative Mueller, Representative Jordan, I think you did stump us a little bit. We're not quite sure how it would work. Some of these programs, like the teacher shortage loan repayment one, is a program that individual teachers apply for. So I think in that case, it would be more about a teacher that's gone through this type of program rather than the program itself. Yeah, so the person from Teach Minnesota might have a better sense of which programs specifically and how that would work.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Mueller.
I would say that, again, just because they apply, just like anyone else, doesn't mean they automatically get it. And if they don't qualify for that, like if they are if they're approved program, but they don't, qualify for something else, then obviously they wouldn't apply for that. So that's all I was trying to clarify.
Lead Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Mueller. Wow, I can't wait to text my good friend and mentor, Jim Dabney, after this is over. But, yeah, I think it's I don't know, maybe take that for what it's worth. I think that makes sense. Yeah, seems like a good bill.
Representative Keeler, and just to know, members, so we usually try to let Rep. Jordan wrap up, but go ahead, Rep. Keeler.
I'm sorry.
But that's okay. So that's why I kind of took time to look around, but you just go for it. You always have good questions.
Okay, thank
Representative
you,
Keeler.
Chair. I was more just trying to grasp kind of what we're doing here. I like that. To be honest, a lot of these programs that are listed are programs that I helped implement more through the higher education lane because it's while they're getting like their education to become a teacher. So I guess I think it's great. I have to look into it more, but can you talk to me a little bit about how this would overlap with OHE? Like I know Pellsby's part of it, but just talk to me how it's overlapping with higher education as well, because a lot of these are teacher training, things that are happening in the higher ed world. Again, just trying to eliminate some of those silos to make sure that we're not missing anything here.
Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Chair Bennett, and thank you, Representative Keeler. The best answer I can come up with, because again, I have never been in on like the higher education committee, is whatever the alternative pathway would require, especially if they have to partner with any type of higher education institution, would still be a requirement for the alternative pathway. Whatever Pellsby has approved as an alternative pathway would still maintain those requirements. All it's asking this to do is say, hey, if it's already been approved, then they should be able to apply for some of these funds so they can support the teachers that have decided to go through those alternative pathways.
Representative Keeler.
Yeah, that's good. So it really just sounds like we're allowing them to be approved applicants in this process.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, Representative Mueller, would you like to wrap your bill up?
I would. Thank you, Chair Bennett and members. Yeah, it's supposed to be a simple bill. It's supposed to be something that just addresses our teacher shortage. And I was really impressed with some of the things that I saw when I was visiting Teach Minnesota. And so I'm excited that we'll be able to have some clarifying language. And with that, Madam Chair, are we sending this to Education Finance? All right, I'd like to renew my motion to send this to Education Finance.
Representative Mueller renews the motion that House File 1959 be re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, the motion prevails. I hit that at the wrong time. The motion prevails, and House File 1959 is re-referred to the Education Finance Committee. There we go. Okay, Representative Hill, you can go ahead and make your way to the table while he comes up. Our last bill on the agenda is House File 1418. Representative Hill, when you get yourself ready there, and your presenter too, we've got. So Representative Hill moves House File 1418 before the committee with the chair's intent to lay over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill or further consideration at a later date. And Representative Hill, you understand you have a DE3 author amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so Representative Hill has an author's amendment. Members, we will adopt the DE3 amendment, which should be in your folders. This will put the bill in the shape the author prefers, and then Representative Hill will present his bill as amended. So all those in favor of the DE3 amendment say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails and the DE3 amendment is adopted. So Representative Hill, go ahead and present your bill as amended or introduce your presenter. Either, what's your preference? You go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chair Bennett and members. I'll do a quick introduction here on House File 1418. And this is a bill that's regarding refinements for the Professional Educator Standards and Licensing Board. The bill before us today seeks the vital operations of Pellsby and their ability to efficiently process and issue teaching licenses here in Minnesota. The bill also seeks to support evolving alternative pathways to licensure and seeks to remedy the emerging shortage of teachers in our state and our country. Also in this bill, there are efforts to continue the streamlining of grant programs through transfers to MDE's Educator Workforce Division. One other thing this bill seeks to do is to transfer both administrator and paraprofessional licensing to MDE to better align jurisdiction over these important licensing categories. With me here today, as I have had in the past when we've discussed Pellsby, is Dr. Yelena Bailey, and she serves as the Executive Director at Pellsby. And I will turn it over here to Dr. Bailey. We may be having some tech issues here, but I think we're up and running now. So take it away, Dr. Bailey.
Chair Bennett, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Dr. Yelena Bailey. I'm the Executive Director of Pellsby. I want to thank Representative Hill for authoring this bill. HF 1418 supports vital operations for Pellsby, including our ability to process and issue teaching licenses in a timely manner. It also supports alternative pathways to teacher licensure, including licensure via portfolio and the Heritage Language Pathway Program. Because this bill is largely operational, I wanted to provide a brief bit of context for our work. So Pellsby licenses 110,000 teachers in the state of Minnesota, which means we issue tens of thousands of licenses each year. We're also responsible for the accreditation of 38 teacher preparation providers in the state, and those providers run nearly 700 teacher licensure programs across the state. In addition to that, we hold monthly board meetings and an annual retreat where we work on setting and revising teacher licensure standards through rulemaking. We're also responsible for ensuring those licensed teachers have the right license for their teaching assignment in the 550 school districts and charter schools across the state. Finally, last year we administered $17 million in grant funding, all of which were for incredibly important grant programs, but the amount of those programs has outpaced Pellsby's size and capacity as a small agency, which is why this bill proposes moving those grant-making duties to the Department of Education. So I'll provide a very brief walkthrough of the bill, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. And this walkthrough is of the amended version of the bill. So Section 1 moves the Teachers of Color and American Indian teacher reporting requirement to the Department of Education, and that's in alignment with them taking on those new grant programs where Pellsby and the Office of Higher Education would collaborate on that report. Sections 2 through 4 move the voluntary paraprofessional credential to MDE, and that's simply in alignment with their jurisdiction over non-licensed staff, whereas Pellsby is a licensing board for teachers. Section 5 removes an outdated reference to the old in-task standards, or the standards of the teaching profession, in favor of the current standards, and it also removes an obsolete reporting requirement. Section 6 simply removes some redundant language. Section 7 removes a requirement that Tier 1 teachers take but not pass a content exam in order to renew their license. Section 8 moves the collaborative Urban and Greater Minnesota Educators of Color grant to the Department of Education. And then sections 9 through 13 move the teacher mentorship and retention of effective teachers grant to the Department of Education. Section 14 simply aligns our reporting requirements on an alternative teacher preparation grant with the actual administering of that grant program. Section 15 just transfers our entire grant-making duties to the Department of Education. And then Section 16 transfers all the appropriations for those grants as well as the teacher recruitment marketing campaign grant to MDE. You'll notice in Section 16, it also provides one-time IT funding to make some changes as well as one ongoing FTE to the Board of School Administrators. And this is in alignment with a policy change that you all put in place in 2018, which transferred the duties to issue administrator licenses to the Board of School Administrators. Last year, my colleague at the Board of School Administrators and I, newly in our positions, discovered that was an oversight by our predecessors, so we're simply trying to get some funding to come in alignment with current law and practice. Section 17 is about supporting alternative pathways to licensure, so I did want to provide just a brief visual and some data. We currently use an online licensure via portfolio platform called Proserva, and this map gives you a picture of any individual who has either started a portfolio or signed up for an account through our online portfolio. And as you'll see, it's spread across the entire state, so this really is a pathway that supports educators and aspiring educators in both greater Minnesota and the metro area. This next slide just gives you some quick data to show the growth we've had in licensure via portfolio. And if you look at that final row, you'll see that as of the halfway mark of this fiscal year, we've already issued more licenses via portfolio than we did all of last year or the previous fiscal year. So there's a lot of growth and interest in this pathway, which is why it's vital we continue to support it, especially given the teacher shortage. So Section 17 simply increases our operations funds just to cover staff salaries. It funds portfolio review because licensure via portfolio requires expert review by teachers who are trained or working in those licensure areas. It funds the Heritage Language Educator Pathway Program. It funds alternative pathway programs like portfolio cohorts, where those are cohorts where we work with districts who have a shortage and want to train up their Tier 1 teachers, for example, to become library media specialists. So we have funding to support them as they seek to get them licensed through portfolio. And then finally, it would fund our online platform for licensure via portfolio Proserva. The last thing I'll mention is that HF 1418 does not include an appropriation for the Preparation Pathways Grant Program, which was designed to help with alternative pathways like licensure via portfolio. That's simply because that work is largely carried out by the staff mentioned in Section 17. So Pellsby recommends reallocating those funds to cover the needs in Section 17. So that's the walkthrough, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. And Representative Hill, shall we go to our testifiers? Okay with that? All right, so we do have some testifiers, including some joining by remote for this bill. I will ask testifiers to keep their comments to about 2 minutes, please. And first of all, we have Ms. Dikwa, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the name, from Minneapolis Public. Say that again? Muhyiddin? All right. And Matt Rigg can also come up. Dr. Bailey, if you want to just like sit in the back, because I bet there'll be some questions for you. We'll get you back up there eventually here. So let's start with Ms. Muhyiddin. And go ahead and introduce yourself for the record, and you can pronounce your name correctly if I didn't, and then where you're from, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Daqa Muhyiddin. Good afternoon, Chair Bennett and members of the committee. My name is Daqa Muhyiddin, and I'm a district program facilitator for Minneapolis Public Schools. A fact sheet about the Heritage Language Program has been submitted, and I request your attention towards that in your convenience. But before we do, I expect, before we go, I wanted to speak to your hearts. I'm a little nervous, so please bear with me. And when I'm nervous, I talk a little too fast. Growing up in southern Minnesota, I heard phrases like oofta and you betcha. People spoke proudly of their heritage, whether it was Irish, German, or Swedish. Some even said, I'm quarter Swedish, German, native, Norwegian, native. It was a very difficult concept for me to understand, but hearing their pride in their ancestry added to my pride in my own heritage language and culture. It wasn't until I became an ESL teacher and collaborated with Swedish Institute that I realized the depth of language loss experienced by Minnesotans and how deeply some members of our community grieve it. At Wellstone, we had a story exchange that included Swedish elders bringing their families' immigrant trunks and sharing their immigrant stories. I met Swedish elders who would visit Sweden and meet long-lost relatives, grandparents, siblings, cousins, etc., but had to use a translator to connect with them and learn more about their family history. Those elders would advise my students, who were newer immigrants, to retain their heritage, culture. Research shows that when students don't see themselves reflected in their curriculum, they struggle to learn. But when they do feel seen, they excel academically and socially. They perform better in tests and in schools and contribute to our country's economy. A few years ago, when I presented to this committee, we didn't have licenses for languages such as Somali, Karen, Afan, or Hmong. Since then, we've had 20 approved portfolios, including the first Somali licensed teacher from Rochester, Minnesota, and a Karen teacher from St. Paul Public Schools. You joined this committee because you care about students and their learning. So let me share a story from Minneapolis Public Schools with you. Since launching our program, we now have over 350 students who've never had the opportunity to not be in a space where they can learn their heritage language. From the time they began learning, they've had access to their heritage language, which is Somali on our end, but we also have a Hmong program. I will end with an anecdote. I love hearing family stories, and I was having a conversation with a family member, a mother recently. She called to share a story with me. She said her husband had promised to take the kids to the playground and came back home from working in Amazon super tired. And so that day, he wanted to check out and not take him and keep his promise. So he said, you know what, kids, I'll take you tomorrow. And his son responded, Abe, you can't say that. He said, Balandaro wa dindaro, 3 phrases, which I will translate, which roughly translates to not keep your promise is to not have a faith. We are a language that uses proverbs a lot. She said immediately her husband went to the room, changed, came out and said, let's go. She was very thankful that we gave her kids the ability to connect with them, to connect, to communicate in a way where the father understood. He didn't have to cry. He didn't have to throw a tantrum. He just said 3 phrases and he was understood. This is the programming that we are providing. Proficiency in heritage languages can also lead to economic opportunities and competitiveness in the global marketplace. I ask you today to continue funding the programming through the portfolio route that funds less commonly taught languages like Somali and Hmong, and thank you all for listening. I appreciate you.
Thank you for your testimony. I love the stories, by the way. And I moved from the Twin Cities to southern Minnesota for my first teaching job, and that's where I learned about lefse and lutefisk. And I'll take lefse, but lutefisk is still, I just don't think fish should jiggle. That's my thought. Anyway.
Try Swedish pancakes, they're sweet.
Yes, yes. Matt Rigg, go ahead and introduce yourself and begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, representatives. My name is Dr. Matthew Allen Rigg, and I work as an education issues specialist at Education Minnesota. I'm here to lend our support to House File 1418, which would modify teacher licensure provisions, transfer grants from Pellsby to the Department of Education, modify some reporting requirements, and appropriate some money for Pellsby to continue doing its job. From our perspective, this bill is not controversial. It supports the critical operations performed for the state of Minnesota by Pellsby, including the ability to process and issue teaching licenses in a timely manner, an issue our members care about very much. The bill supports the continuation of alternative pathways, such as licensure via portfolio and the heritage language pathway, which are increasingly important as we address the lack of respect for public educators, our pay, pensions, and health care, and other issues that prevent highly qualified teachers from entering and continuing in our honored profession. The bill streamlines state grants programs by transferring them to MDE's Educator Workforce Division. And finally, this bill removes the requirement to attempt but not pass a test before renewing a Tier 1 license, expediting the renewal process. Education Minnesota supports the operational excellence of Pellsby and its proposed changes to jurisdiction and capacity, as well as through supporting its staff. Together, we must ensure Pellsby remains fully staffed to process licenses and is fully funded such that they may review teacher licensure programs and portfolios and fund programs to support teachers in shortage areas through initiatives like portfolio cohorts and heritage language pathways. Education Minnesota supports the mission and vision of Pellsby to ensure all Minnesota students have high-quality educators in their schools and to make sure equitable education is practiced through high licensure standards, quality educator preparation programs, and stakeholder engagement. Thank you very much for your time and for your support of House File 1418.
Thank you. Now we have some remote testifiers. We will start with Naomi Hughes. And Naomi, go ahead and speak up when you can hear us.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we are. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Naomi Hughes. I am a library media specialist in the Rochester Public Schools. Currently, I serve all 4 of their middle schools. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give my personal testimony in support of HF 1418, and particularly in support of the licensure via portfolio program. Just a few months ago, I was able to obtain my own teaching license through this program. I had recently transitioned from a career as an author to a career as a school librarian in my mid-30s, at a time when I had a young child as well as a lot of student debt from my prior degree. Pellsby's portfolio program saved me thousands of dollars in tuition bills, as well as years of pursuing a second degree in a field that I already had expertise in, thanks to my prior work as a school librarian in a Tier 2 capacity, as well as my experience as an author. The process of developing my portfolio for this alternative licensure program in order to prove that expertise was very rigorous, and required that I provide multiple pieces of evidence for each state standard to prove that I'm qualified to teach in my field. And at the end of it, I was able to more fully support my school district as a licensed educator. Many other fledgling educators have and hopefully will continue to benefit from this program, especially those who might have financial or other barriers to obtaining a traditional education degree and license. This program is also beneficial to schools that face a shortage of educators, allowing qualified teachers to enter their fields years sooner than they might otherwise be able to. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. The next remote testifier is Juliana Lillahai. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Juliana, are you on?
That was perfect. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Stellar. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Juliana Lillahai, and I'm here to express my support for the continued funding of Minnesota's licensure through portfolio program as well. First off, I want to say that I'm testifying from overseas. Though originally from Howard Lake, Minnesota, I am currently a kindergarten teacher at a bilingual school here in Madrid, Spain. Last June, I received my Minnesota teaching license via the licensure through portfolio program. I think I'm a good example of the type of non-traditional teaching candidate this program supports. As such, I want to underscore my credentials, as licensure by portfolio demands high standards. I have a Bachelor of Science in Developmental Psych from the U of M and a master's degree in bilingual education from the University of Alcalá in Spain. The portfolio process is rigorous and evidence-based, requiring us teachers to demonstrate mastery of Minnesota's teaching competencies, submit extensive documentation of student impact, and undergo really thorough evaluation. I want to take a moment to emphasize the rigor required by the program. I spent about 4 months or more than 100 hours compiling and refining my own portfolio. The licensure via portfolio program was the best pathway for me to become a licensed teacher in Minnesota, as I did my student teaching here in Madrid. Thanks to this program, I'll be able to teach in Minnesota schools next fall when I return to the US. I believe I'll bring a valuable experience and dedication into Minnesota classrooms that I would be otherwise unable to contribute. In sum, I believe that without adequate funding, we risk damaging a proven pathway that brings qualified, passionate educators into Minnesota classrooms. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you. The next remote testifier is Laurel Webster. Laurel, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Yes.
There
Hi.
she is. Go ahead and introduce yourself and begin.
Thank you. My name is Laurel Webster, and I am a high school English teacher in Dawson, Minnesota, which is a rural community out west. And I just have to say that Madison, Minnesota is the lutefisk capital of Minnesota, and that is just the town quite a little bit north of us here in Lacaparo County. So I just had to put my little, I've never tried it. I don't think I like jigglyfish either. I pursued the licensure via portfolio program as a mature educator due to a life change. I was looking to enhance my financial status, and I have worked in the school district here in Dawson for 15 years, and for most of those years I worked in the office with the high school principal as his assistant. In the last 3 years I have been teaching high school English. I went back to school very late in my late 40s in order to attain a master's degree in science and education, not knowing exactly what I wanted to teach, but having a good idea. And then I was lucky enough to be hired by my school district to teach English. And then I decided that I would pursue the licensure via portfolio program in order to obtain the Tier 3 license in Communication Arts and Literature for grades 5 through 12, which I'm happy to say I did receive in November. This pathway allowed me to remain in the county where my family is, along with giving me an opportunity to remain working as I pursued studies, and also gave me an opportunity to try teaching in a content area that I was interested in. One of my advisors in my master's program actually encouraged me to pursue English. And so not only has the licensure via portfolio program allowed me to pursue teaching, it has also given me an open pathway to pursue expanding my knowledge as an educator, bringing more different diverse types of literature into my classroom, receiving grants through the Minneapolis Foundation and the Shakopee Sioux community, and receiving books through Books Are Good Medicine. So the portfolio program has opened doorways for me, not just in where I am able to teach and what I am able to teach, but also in becoming a better educator. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And members, that concludes our public testimony for the day. So is there any discussion here? Representative Lawrence.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation today as well. I just got a couple questions. These are probably more financial questions than anything else. And I think for the Director of Pelsby more so. But I'm just kind of reference section 15 as we go into it here. And I have two basic questions. One, as you transfer a lot of the responsibilities and the duties to MDE, will you have staff overload at this point in time? Or will there be a financial surplus in Pelsby? What's the repercussion of doing that?
Dr. Bailey.
Yes. Madam Chair, members of the committee, it's a great question. So the transfer actually includes both the staff member. We have one staff member currently who administers all of our grants, and she's funded through the administrative costs that's associated with those grants. So that administrative cost also goes to MDE. So it's no net loss or gain for Pelsby. So the funding that supports that work and the staff member would go to MDE as well.
Okay.
Representative Lawrence, follow-up?
Madam Chair, yeah, follow-up question is, and this is more of a repercussion to MDE, and I think you probably answered it. For MDE, then they're not going to be looking for additional staffing to go into this. And then a fundamental question is, does MDE take a percentage of the grant money to finance the administration of it?
Dr. Bailey.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So each grant does have a set percentage or amount that's allowed for administration. That remains unchanged in the statutes. And so that would go to MDE. I have not heard from MDE that they plan to seek any additional staff members. They already have an existing staff that work in their educator workforce department, and they're equipped to do these grants. They have several staff members who work on this, which is why they have a greater capacity than we do.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Lee Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Hill, and thank you, Dr. Bailey, for this presentation. Pelsby, I think, is one of our B-side agencies, so it's always good to hear more about what we have going on. And I know that Dr. Bailey is a great resource for any members that have questions about Pelsby or licensure. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you. And before I hand this off to Representative Hill to close, I do have a question for Pelsby, if I could. In the presentation here that you, and the materials provided, it appears that 12 initial Tier 3 licenses have been issued through the portfolio process during those 3 years. So I'm wondering if you could tell me, Dr. Bailey, and the committee, how many Tier 3 licenses have been issued by Pelsby through the experience pathway during that same time period? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, members, we have about 90, 95 or so each year that are issued through the experience pathway. We anticipate that as this grows, it'll have a similar impact, but as you have heard, it's still spreading the news that this pathway is available and supported by Pelsby.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. So that was 95 a year or for the 3 years?
Madam Chair, members, per year.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you, appreciate that. Representative Hill, would you like to close on your bill?
Yes, thank you, Chair Bennett and members. And I know better than to ramble when we're at the end of the agenda here, but just want to thank you for the opportunity and for continuing this work with Pelsby in working to refine the great work they do. Thanks for the chance to be with you.
Thank you, Representative Hill, and for Dr. Bailey for being here as well to answer questions. Members, let's see, the bill is going to be, the chair lays over House File 1418 as amended for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill or further consideration at a later date. So members, we did well. Look at that. We're done early. That concludes our agenda for today. Thank you for the good conversations. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, March 12th. With that, the committee stands adjourned.